Welcome to the Lonestar Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. This episode, I'm joined by Jay Maguire of the Texas Hemp Federation. How are you doing tonight, Jay?
I'm great, Jesse. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I'm exhausted.
Well, I can understand why. Capital days will take it out of you.
Well, Will, you listen to every bad thing that's ever happened to any Texan when you go to almost any committee hearing. No matter what it's about.
That old expression about, people shouldn't have to watch sausage making or legislating is really true because it'll wear you out.
Sausage making.
It's ugly. It's ugly. You hear these extreme things.
The slaughterhouse. It ain't pretty.
Yes, it ain't pretty.
It's like watching a motorcycle crash with a guy who has no helmet on.
Yes, sir. And then in a panel of 150 people and 31 people pointing out that same thing you just saw and all having a different attitude about it.
Exactly. Yeah, today was, I went to testify on House Bill 382, which was about consumer protection. We were talking about that before. And Gramps, who's been hosting and co-host, he went to go testify for House Bill 2883, which is they want to set up checkpoints between coming in from New Mexico, only coming in from New Mexico, not leaving. And he testified about, he's like, yeah, you're looking to target people who are going to use the legal market in New Mexico. And they're like, you really think that? Yeah, it's in the bill.
So you want to leave the state, it's fine. Adios, get out of here. But you're coming in, you're taking your chances. That's basically.
Yeah. So what's been going on with the Texas Hemp Federation, Jay?
So, a lot of the work that we do is behind the scenes with legal cases and with the legislature. I can announce to you today that one of our advisory board members, Daryl and Justin Surif of the company that makes Escobars and Pastel Cartel, I think are their two best known products. We're not only big supporters of ours, but they added some capacity to the lobbying effort. The team at Maguire Woods, the lobby shop for that law firm, just got engaged today. So I will be coordinating with them along with the other things that I do, like getting grassroots assistance, getting people to testify, writing emails and making phone calls to members. I'll be helping with get that lobby team up to speed and give them some advice and pointers and help define their deliverables. What I told them today was that the industry, the companies that work with the Texas Hemp Federation, are interested in making sure that hemp-derived cannabinoids are safe and legal in this state. And that's a full stop. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that this stuff is tested, that the laboratory certificates of analysis should be trusted, that overreach by law enforcement or city councils or even the legislature doesn't overcome the Farm Bill and doesn't overcome the precedents set in those federal circuits that say that hemp and hemp-derived products are legal. So, yes, we are opposed to some of the bills that are in the legislature right now, including Senator Perry's bill. I've been pretty vocal about his opposition to the industry and our opposition to what he wants. At the end of the day, if we come out of this legislative session with Delta 8 and the other cannabinoid products legal, then that's a win. If we get out of it also with reasonable restrictions on the legal age limit on not marketing to children, age gating, right? And things like child-proof packaging, things that are already in other places in the law. I think the industry can support that. There may be one or two outliers, but generally speaking, manufacturers I talk to understand that embracing reasonable regulation is the right thing to do to be good corporate citizens. And they also know that it's going to come anyway, and we should be part of the process to make sure that it's a doable and workable fit for
I think sometimes the confusion between communication between consumers, businesses, and the legislature is when consumers and businesses talk about They want proper regulation, reasonable regulation. And I think a lot of legislative members hear that and go, "Oh, I agree with you. That means banning it." And it's like, no, that's not. It's not what we're asking for. We're asking for it to be treated. We come together and we agree on some rules that we think works for everybody, both the consumer, the manufacturer, the businesses that are involved, the distributors, all of that together, and it keeps everybody in check with one another.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's what we do for, other kinds of products like beer and liquor. It is fair to say that cannabinoid products can be intoxicating, and as such, we should treat them, with a reasonable amount of control, but not what Senator Perry and some others up there would like to do, which is regulate us out of the market. So, we will 100% show up and support anything reasonable that protects consumers and protects our businesses. Let me give you an example of a problem that we have that you might not even think, and it's got nothing to do with the cannabinoids itself. We have a tremendous problem in this country with counterfeiting cannabis vape products. I won't mention the names, but some of the most popular and expensive Delta 8 vapes, they might cost, I'm going to just throw these numbers out there. They might cost the retailer, the wholesale price might be, say, $10. And they're sold, for 15 or somewhere between 15 and 20. The distributors sometimes have been known to take the legitimate product from the actual manufacturer of that brand, packaging and all, send it to a factory in China, which replicates perfectly the packaging and the device and the flavor profile. And so the distributor passes off these knockoffs to retailers, and sometimes the retailers are in on it and sometimes they're not. And the consumer is getting what? They're paying for what they think is not just a premium product, but a product that they know is tested and safe because the QR codes are on it and the certificates of analysis that QR code points to are authentic. But what they're actually inhaling in their vape, it's anybody's guess. And so it could be, could be Delta 8, could be something else completely different. We have to fix that problem. And the existing laws are effective. I can say that Pastel Cartel and Escobars.
I think we need some polishing. I would say personally, we need some polishing on some of the things we put into place. We talk about having a COA, a lab result. And I think QR codes are a great and efficient way for people to go and find this information. But there was a company a while back that you talk about, big popular brand. I won't say their name either, but before the hemp thing became a big deal and we required QR codes, they were putting QR codes on their packaging saying, well, ours is authentic because we have a QR code that you can go and authenticate our product with. And it's like, anybody can make a QR code. Well, I've been making QR codes myself since 2010. They're not new. There's free online QR code generators. You can make anything a QR code if you want it. So that's not how you really authenticate. It's like, it's got to be attached to some information. And like you said, we need authenticated lab results. It's like we need to have polished around and say, hey, you're going to have to go and audit labs. You're going to have to audit these reports and make sure that they're doing the right thing and these products are what they say they are.
If some third-party authenticating mechanism needs to be brought into play here, it could be like a JD Powers type of thing where you've got an accrediting body or a company that reviews the results and tests them independently to make sure that they match up. And if your results are consistently wrong, then there's a problem, and we got to fix that. I think transparency on that is one piece of the solution. The other piece probably has to be increasing or creating criminal penalties for falsifying a COA. The public, business, and law enforcement and the courts all need to know that the certificate of analysis is genuine. You and I have talked about this before. a couple of the criminal cases
Extensively.
that the Texas Hemp Federation has assisted the defendants in have involved the police not believing the paperwork that they're looking at. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing for the police to be skeptical, but having the level of assurance that if they're looking at a certificate of analysis with the lab's name and all the right numbers, identifying numbers, licensing numbers, dates of testing, methodologies, and and the things they're testing for, they should have the presumption that that is accurate and honest. But they don't right now. And I think cracking down on some of the bad actors that are out there, like, companies that just fake it. And I'm sure there are one or two, and that's all it takes is one or two. That will go a long way towards helping bring attitudes on the part of enforcement and prosecutors in line with what our industry's standard and best practices actually are. And that will protect the businesses and it will protect the consumers.
Well, very much so. And the part of what I've wanted to see with going with the lab reports and where they're kept at, I would say, is I personally believe that's not something that should be kept on the manufacturer's own database website. I mean, they can keep a copy if they want, and they should be able to have it available on their website if they want. But I personally believe that when a consumer goes to look at it, I would feel more comfortable if I got the report directly from the lab. They had it in their database, and it was going to stay there for a given amount of time legally required.
Yeah, maybe as long as that product is in the stream of commerce. For example, you produce a batch of vape products. How long will they be on the shelf at the maximum? Double that, and maybe that could be the length of time that those records have to be kept. And this is not unprecedented. If you have a company or a nonprofit and you register it, you create the corporation. Generally, you have an agent that receives inquiries by the state, so that
Well, you're required to.
Yes,
To
yeah.
have an agent.
I think in all cases, right?
LLCs, nonprofit,
registered agent that's their job. They're an independent third party, and that's all they do.
They can be part of the company itself, but you have to have somebody designated that will receive correspondence in case like a legal matter comes up.
Right, and they are on the hook if they're playing fast and loose with the information. And if you watch certain movies, for example, at the very beginning, they will always talk about how the actors in the movies all meet a certain age criteria, and the custodian of records can be reached at with the address. That custodian of records is on the hook for the veracity of that information. I don't think it would be too hard, even if industry were to form it themselves, to create an independent repository of all this information. That's a really good idea, Jesse. You really ought to be running a trade association.
Well, it's funny because I look at some of the issues that I've seen when we first started this market out and difficulties we were having where I saw products that I could personally look at the COA and go, these people are not legit. The lab is legit, right, but the products themselves aren't, because they've got the same COA for 4 different types of products. And luckily, I'm not seeing that anymore, because enough of us, when we were seeing this, we're going, we know better. This looks like you bought a distillate and you just put it amongst brownies, gummies, whatever you get your hands on. And you did not test individual products. It's painfully obvious you did not do so. So
sure,
we're not buying your product. We're not recommending it to anybody. And good luck to anybody else that's been part of our group. They're probably going to bash you and badmouth you now because it's painfully obvious you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah, and they hopefully get shamed out of the industry. But the damage that could be caused if any of those products cause an illness, for example,
it's immense.
Death. And all we have to do is look back to the EVALI crisis a few years ago in the vape industry, where nicotine vape was cited as an imminent health threat to all America, because some drug dealers were putting vitamin E acetate tainted distillate in what was supposed to be nicotine cartridges. I want to tell you that at least 2 of the big companies I worked for at the time told me they had a 60% drop in their revenue for a good substantial period of time just because of that. So, I think 3,200 people got sick. Absolutely, don't use that brand of cartridges. But what happens often is that the media doesn't focus on the specifics; they focus on the general, and the entire industry could be tarred with the same brush if a bad actor causes that kind of damage. So I think it's incumbent on industry to work with government and educate the public to the extent that we can to try to prevent those things from happening.
Well, it is time for us to go to a sponsor break. We'll continue this after our break, and we'll talk about what's happening with the legislative session as well. I'm joined by Jay Maguire this week of the Texas Hemp Federation. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. Texas Cannabis Collective, the Lonestar Collective podcast. We'll be right back after this sponsor break.
Howdy, Colt Power here. These days, many people are choosing to add CBD to their wellness routine. Why? Some like CBD for how it may help them with their focus. Others enjoy the way the plant compound may assist them with their sore muscles and relaxation. For me, CBD has been a game changer in keeping my old sports injuries managed so I can work out and be present for my family. If you've ever been curious about CBD, I invite you to check out our Texas-grown, Texas-made products at powerbiofarms.com. That's Power, BIOPHARMS.com.
Thrive Apothecary offers an experience truly unique from anything else in Texas. A full-service cannabis solution that is doctor-owned and offers customers every level of cannabis legally available in Texas. From traditional CBD products to emerging hemp-derived THC edibles, smokables, and now medical cannabis. As a licensed medical cannabis provider, prospective patients from anywhere in Texas can book a sponsored online eligibility consultation to determine if they qualify for a medical marijuana prescription from the comfort of their own home. Plus, for Texas veterans, the first prescription appointment is donated by Thrive. Visit thrivetx.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective, distributed on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and many more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. And now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. I'm joined this week by guest Jay Maguire of the Texas Hemp Federation. Jay and I were just finishing up talking about the vape crisis we had years back, and it wasn't a nicotine vape crisis. There was actually a black market marijuana vape crisis, and our media totally took it completely and warped it, and so did our congressional leaders. And now we're going to watch as our state congressional leaders possibly warp our hemp market. Isn't it going to be lovely?
Politicians forever have been utilizing moral panic, which is a very specific, defined phenomenon in sociology and psychology. It's a process by which the public is made to panic about a problem that is largely exaggerated or imaginary. And the two principal co-conspirators, whether they're talking to each other or not, are the politicians and the media. So they feed off each other. And so much of what we will see is, on the news, there'll be some crisis, usually involving kids, often involving kids. When I was young, there was a crisis about allegedly Satan worshipers abusing kids in daycares, and actually a Texas couple went to prison for it.
That's my wife. I got him home today, and my wife was watching like a documentary about that.
And so media blows it up. Government reacts. People in government, especially elected officials, want to stake out positions and territory on issues. Often they're motivated by good motives, but it becomes a kind of increasing circular.
We're watching it right now with TikTok.
Absolutely, we are. This thing with TikTok, I think
right
it's
now.
ridiculous. I don't think the case has been made that the Chinese Communist Party owns our data and is going to use it to our detriment. Somebody has to show me that before I'm willing to shut down that platform. But I'm not in Congress, and I'm not in the administration. They have a whole different set of criteria for what they act on, I guess.
Well, they're screaming. They're screaming as well about the data collection. It's like, what about like you said, it's always children. What about the kids and what they're doing to the kids? And I'm digital media innovation major in university, finishing up now, and they've been teaching us in our classes. It's parents having to control screen time, and it's the same thing we're watching in the hemp industry. You always last session. What about these kids who go in the store and they could get Delta 8? And I'm like, what? Wait, what store is selling this where a kid could grab this? Because I've yet to see that gas station yet. And how? Like, what? Why is the solution the knee-jerk reaction of ban the whole thing rather than, like we mentioned before, to just age gate, like we've done with other products?
That's right. Age gating, I'm familiar with this because of the tobacco industry and then the nicotine vape industry and now what we're working with hemp products. It's really simple. If a person comes in to buy a product that is in that category of something that needs to be age gated, the clerk checks the ID. And there are various levels of sort of security or assurance that you can implement there. They range from the clerk looks at the ID every time to the clerk scans the ID, and that there's a tracking widget on the point of sale software that can prove that the store checked the ID. Because sometimes the store might have to prove that. Those are all details. What's not happening?
I used to work that side of the business. I know very well about that.
Yeah, but what's not happening is 13-year-olds aren't going into convenience stores and buying vapes.
You know when a 13-year-old goes into a convenience store to buy a vape, when the state sends them in to buy a vape to prove if they're buying them or not.
Yep.
That's the only time we had minors come into my store when I worked at 7-Eleven to buy alcohol was when TABC sent them in to buy alcohol.
Could you tell that they were like confidential? They're called confidential informants, aren't they? CIs, whatever they are.
They had a different term for them at the time, and it's funny because Texas apparently is one of the few states where if you ask if they're 21 and they say that they are, and you sell it to them, TABC is not allowed to go after you for it. They consider it I can't remember the term for it. But other states don't do it. They basically say it's fine. When the police officers trick you into doing something you normally wouldn't do. I'm trying to remember
it's entrapment.
Entrapment. Texas considers that entrapment. A lot of other states do not.
I think it's kind of a general truism under a Supreme Court ruling that law enforcement is permitted to lie in the pursuit of its job. And I can see how that would be absolutely necessary sometimes. But, if you ask somebody if they're a police officer or working for the police and they say no and they actually are, I think that's just not kosher under general principles of American democracy. But
but back to topic, I'm not saying there aren't kids who don't go in.
Where moral panic would come in, is that, for example, when Juul entered the vape market and all of a sudden high school kids, they all had to have Juuls and they all got them. They weren't buying them themselves, though. They largely obtained them through what I think the industry called social sources. So you're 16 and you got an 18-year-old friend, and they go and buy them from the 7-Eleven and they hand them out to their other friends. That is a problem, but it's a problem that only the parents can really fix.
Adults are buying it for them. And right. I say that from personal experience of being 16, 17 years old and having adults buy cigarettes for me back in the mid-2000s. Having family members I knew buy them for me.
I mean, I think I won't go there, but look, I'm from an Irish working class family. Probably every guy in my lineage started smoking when they were teenagers, certainly. So I think you're absolutely right. It tracks, but banning the products because kids are getting a hold of it deprives adults of the liberty to purchase the products that they want. And we're supposed to be a free country with free men and free women and freedom. So you cannot, Republicans, go run on that freedom platform and then start being the nanny state. It's inconsistent.
I think a good comparison we see when people try, and this isn't me ragging on the alcohol industry. I think alcohol and cannabis should be working hand in hand. And I don't think alcohol should be banned under this notion that where I grew up out near Fredericksburg. And when I was growing up, they told us Fredericksburg and Gillespie County had the highest underage DUI rate like in the country. And it was like, what? How, what? And it turns out it's like, it starts becoming believable when you start realizing, well, it's primarily German town. The state allows parents to give their kids alcohol as long as they're within their presence. So you have ethnic Germans who are like, we normally give our kids alcohol. So you have kids downing alcohol like crazy, given to them by their families, and then they go out and drive. And it's cut down over the years as we actually raise like the drinking age. But we don't ban alcohol. We didn't ban alcohol over it. We didn't go back in a prohibition era over that. We were like, no, that's not the proper response to this.
Right.
And we took the measure we're asking. Now, age gate this.
Well, it's not, look, we're not trying to solve Middle East peace here. You know, we're just trying to make sure that everybody is safe, and that the products are purchasable and purchased only by people who are eligible to use them and not by kids. But the point that we started off on was that politicians will use what about the kids as a rationale for doing something that infringes on our rights. And, you know, it's not just the job of the Texas Hemp Federation or the Cannabis Collective to guard against that. Any group concerned with the rights of citizens should weigh in. And, you know, I guarantee you that there are plenty of Texans out there who will stand up, you know, for our rights as citizens and consumers. And that does not mean we don't care about kids. I've got a stepdaughter and a daughter. I absolutely would not have been in favor of being able to buy this stuff. And guess what? They weren't. They still aren't. And, you know, they're just fine, by the way. They both, well, no, I know at least one of them has used Delta 8. It's helped her. And, you know, we don't have the moral panic image of, you know, kids being strung out on the street and ending up on heroin because they started off with a Delta 8 gummy. So,
I got a 10-year-old kid, and I love that we're at a place where I can go and educate him about this. When I mentioned last session, in Perry's committee meeting, it was like, my kid was like 8.5, 9 at the time. I was like, but I'm glad I can take my kid and show him that there's all of the uses, not just the industrial, but all of it. And I can comfortably teach him without having to panic that somebody's going to come after me for it.
Right. So
I'm hoping, you know, we're going to come back after a sponsor break here in a moment. We're going to talk about Perry's bill. We were supposed to be doing that this section. Well, we're going to take an entire section to talk about that bill and the companions that are going with it. And that's what we really need to be talking about. We need to get people prepped for this. So I appreciate your patience with this, Jay. It's always a great discussion, though.
I can talk to you all day long, Jesse.
Yeah. I'm your host, Jesse Williams, the Lonestar Collective podcast. This week, our guest is Jay Maguire of the Texas Hemp Federation. We'll be right back after this sponsor break.
Howdy, Colt Power here. These days, many people are choosing to add CBD to their wellness routine. Why? Some like CBD for how it may help them with their focus. Others enjoy the way the plant compound may assist them with their sore muscles and relaxation. For me, CBD has been a game changer in keeping my old sports injuries managed so I can work out and be present for my family. If you've ever been curious about CBD, I invite you to check out our Texas-grown, Texas-made products at powerbiofarms.com. That's power, BIOPHARMS.com.
Thrive Apothecary offers an experience truly unique from anything else in Texas. A full-service cannabis solution that is doctor-owned and offers customers every level of cannabis legally available in Texas. From traditional CBD products to emerging hemp-derived THC edibles, smokables, and now medical cannabis. As a licensed medical cannabis provider, prospective patients from anywhere in Texas can book a sponsored online eligibility consultation to determine if they qualify for a medical marijuana prescription from the comfort of their own home. Plus, for Texas veterans, their first prescription appointment is donated by Thrive. Visit thrivetx.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast, the official podcast of the Texas Cannabis Collective, distributed on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and many more, to give Texans information regarding policy, industry, and culture. And now, back to this week's show.
Welcome back to the Lonestar Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Williams. This week I'm joined by guest Jay Maguire, the Texas Hemp Federation, and we're going to jump right into talking about Senator Perry's bill and the companions that go with it. Senate Bill 264, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Sponsored by your friend and mine, Senator Charles Perry of Lubbock, Texas.
Always a friend.
Always a friend.
Guy.
What can I say about the bill, Jesse? The bill as introduced will not be the bill that is moved from committee. So what is very likely to happen, we could look at the bill as it exists today and give your listeners an analysis of it, but it will not be accurate because the bill that Senator Perry is going to substitute in the committee may look something like this, but we suspect there's going to be a lot more language in it that's bad for the industry. I'm going to give you some generalities because I don't know specifically what he's going to do. My impression of Senator Perry, based on my own experiences testifying in his committee, observing him over the years, and what I'm hearing as feedback from the lobby teams and from just ordinary people who have testified in front of him or met with him, is that he doesn't like our stuff, and he doesn't like us. He was so overtly hostile to the witnesses against the version of this bill that was defeated in the last session, that he compared one witness who's a young guy studying pharmacology, his family owns a lab, compared him unfavorably to the cartels. And so when you've got a member who is that hostile and motivated because he has deep religious and political convictions against intoxicating or addicting things, look for him to act accordingly. I'm looking at my iPad here. Sorry if I keep taking my eyes off the screen.
You are fine, brother.
The bill here, on its face, is not terrible. I expect the committee substitute to be pretty draconian. I think he wants to put restrictions not just on Delta 8, but on any hemp-derived cannabinoid to, if not meet or perhaps exceed the standard set by the federals, the feds, that is the 0.3% by dry weight. Well, what if you've got, for Delta 8, or, I think last session, one of his proposals or ideas he was floating was even CBD. So, and I think he wants to restrict synthetic or synthetically derived cannabinoids also. I note that the bill, the present bill, says that the department, and I guess that's dishes, will determine by rule what synthetic means. And this is really important because I didn't know this. I'm not a chemist, but we have an organic chemist that works with us. If you take CBD and you refine it by heating it and or treating it with a solvent, you get these different cannabinoids. If you ban synthetic cannabinoids, it will apply to the methodologies presently used to turn CBD into the stuff you get on the shelves. That's a fear. And when you use the word synthetic, it's a bit of a scare word because in the minds of legislators, in the minds of, so especially the older folks in the public, the harm of synthetics has to do with a crisis that occurred, which would have been a justifiable moral panic of fake pot that was sold in head shops under the names K2 and Spice. And I want to say that's going back maybe 10 to 15.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
That's
And that's
2009, 2010 when that really kicked off.
synthetic in the sense that you took two chemicals and added them together, put them in a package, and told people to go smoke it. And all kinds of really bad stuff ensued. This had nothing to do with taking a plant, squeezing out the CBD, and then taking the CBD and cracking it into, just like we do with petroleum, cracking it into all these different constituent cannabinoids that are useful to people. I don't see anybody walking around or running around naked in a Walmart, carrying a machete because
trying to bite someone's face off.
Right, but becoming cannibals.
It's not. You don't see the adventures of Florida Man when people are on this.
No, thank God.
And I'd say, the fear you talk about is what I've been trying to tell people when you have the group like Dishes define this, is if they define it the way you've just discussed it, CBD itself would be banned because you've used some sort of mechanical or chemical solvent to extract it. You've had to put it through this process. So now CBD, especially if it's a CBD isolate, you just didn't squeeze CBD out of the plant like orange juice out of an orange. It's not how that works.
I'm not a food scientist or a chemist, but probably almost everything we consume has something in it that's synthesized from something else. So I think
with natural flavors. Right. Does your packaging say that? I hate to break it to you.
The bill also requires these cannabinoids. Let me look at the language. The FDA keeps a list called the Generally Recognized as Safe or GRAS list. Get it? And the GRAS list is very important. Like anything that any additive, coloring, or flavoring that you put in food needs to be on that list if you're going to eat it. I don't know.
Got to be food safe.
That's right. It has to be food safe. I don't know presently because I haven't looked into it, and hopefully somebody should. If
somebody look into that, if you're listening, and
if cannabinoids generally are on the GRAS list, I suspect they are not. I don't think the FDA has gone through the process of evaluating Delta 8, Delta 9, HHC, and all the rest of it to be generally recognized as safe. And so this would be a backdoor way of banning our stuff. If that's the case. So don't say I'm claiming that this is a backdoor ban, but it sure looks like one.
Well, they might try to use that angle, despite that obviously the federal government has went, no, we're not banning it because of that, because if that was the case, they'd have banned it already. Say with no hesitation.
Farm Bill says hemp and all hemp products are legal. Full stop. So
I just don't think that it's one of those things. I was kind of getting it earlier. I don't think people quite grasp. I don't think our legislature quite grasp how much money is in this market right now just for cannabinoid. And even if they wanted to just have industrial, this right now is what's keeping this industry afloat. It is because industrial is not just what everybody wanted. Industrial is a great thing that goes with it. We wanted that too. But the industrial isn't there yet, and it's not marketed to scale to market. It's a proper term. We're just not there with it yet, and this other part's what's technically keeping it afloat. And to me, getting rid of that just kills it. Hemp has no opportunity after that.
Look at where farmers were before Delta 8 emerged. There was a glut of CBD on the market at the time. This is going back 2 years now, maybe a little longer. Glut of CBD on the market. The commodity price fell through the floor. And then all of a sudden, it's not a profitable proposition to be farming this stuff. Industry starts using CBD to create Delta 8 and market products containing Delta 8, and it's viable again. And you can't really argue with that if the intent of creating passing House Bill 1325 in accordance with the Farm Bill, creating this industry was partly to help farmers develop a new cash crop that they can rely on. That will not be the case if these products are banned.
Well, they're and it's not just farmers. I know a shop owner outside of Houston, and he pointed out to his senator, he's like, I started this shop before COVID hit, and I have been able to sell hemp products in my shop, various hemp products. He's like, and this kept my shop afloat during COVID when nobody was buying anything and people didn't have money. He's like, this still kept my shop afloat, and it allowed me to hire people, pay them. He's like, and from what he was telling me, he's paying these guys actually pretty good for working in a shop, like a retail shop. And it's like, yeah, the guy's putting food on these people's tables and roofs over there. He's keeping them alive. He's feeding them. He's basically giving them the capitalism's at work the way it's supposed to be. And now we've got a bill going, no, let's end that.
Let's just end that. The economic arguments are persuasive to probably most legislators, except those that have kind of an ideological opposition to our stuff because they're prohibitionists in the bone, which I think is fair to say that's where Senator Berry's coming from. Or if, as a political issue, it can be used as a wedge or culture war issue, which I kind of suspect some people in the leadership want to find out. Look, the war on drugs was I want to say mostly political, mostly about social control, and these bills echo that. So, given that we've been compared to the cartels in front of an audience and it's archived forever, you can go back and look at it, and that these bills are highly restrictive, I wonder, if part of the motivation is to see is this a wedge issue that we can use to run on? I know that the answer to that's probably no. I think that your profile of your average consumer of gummies and vapes, probably people from all walks of life, but working class people, Trump voters probably use our stuff as much, if not more than anybody else. I personally know that when I've spent the day working in the yard and I've got some aches and pains, it definitely helps me to take a CBD Delta 8 combo, half of one of those. It helps my aches and pains. I'm sure, and I know from people I've talked to that, you're out there working hard every day. This stuff helps. So, the politics may not line up the way that people in the legislature think they do just yet.
I wonder with that in mind, I started thinking about this the last year or so, was that I wonder how many grandmas and grandpas are using this. They're using not just CBD, but they've moved a step beyond, and they're using this to have help them sleep or to not have nightmares when they were out in war, or they were going through rough times. And the thing with that is what's going to happen to them if something like this passes and they get ready to go to the store to buy this and the clerk has to tell them, sorry, we had to pull that all off the shelf. Your government passed a bill saying they don't trust you with this anymore.
Right. Well, I think unfortunately it won't be immediate, but I hope one of the results is that those people show up and vote and make their displeasure known. Because right now, we're relying on the efforts of activists and the people that you work with and industry to defend us, when really this affects everybody, all the consumers in the state, along with it.
I guess the question for right now then is when do you think in the legislative session we might actually be hearing something on this bill in a committee in either the House? Because she's got the identical bill for the House.
Right.
That we could hear a committee hearing on either one of these bills, because that's the time right now where people could actually, once that happens, they can go and testify.
So this is the window of opportunity to get people notified, informed, and organized is pretty narrow. There's a posting rule in the Senate and House rules. A bill being heard before committee you have to give public notice a certain number of days, and those are legislative days before the hearing. And in the case of Senator Berry's committee, he would need to post notice on the Friday before his Tuesday hearing.
From my understanding, it's unless they changed it for this session. Last session, it was you had to give 1 day, you had to give 24-hour notice, and technically that can be waived as well.
I was just going to get there. You can suspend the rules. So if you wanted to ask the full Senate to suspend the rules, and that's sort of a routine thing, I don't think I've ever seen a rule suspension motion go down. So yeah, he could. So we're not going to have probably a whole lot of advance notice when this bill gets to his committee. But once it gets to committee and we know the full extent of the language he's actually going to try to get passed by the legislature, we'll have a little bit of a reprieve between the time the bill passes from his committee and the time it's on the calendar for the floor of the Senate. Same thing with Representative Click's bill. I don't know if that bill is going to move or not. I haven't been told. It'd be a really good question for the Maguire Woods lobby team, and I'll be happy to check in with them and get back to you with what they say. But usually they might have a week. And what I'm going to do, and I would recommend anybody working in the advocacy space do, is send out a call to action for anybody who uses these products to send an email, make a phone call, or show up and tell your elected official why this is bad for you.
And I do want to point out that last session, talking about the rules being changed for a committee hearing, the medical bill had that happen to it. It got to the point where it was, you had to have this committee hearing by this date or it can't pass. That date, I believe, was like a Friday. They did not have the hearing that day, but so many people had called in and was so upset that this hadn't moved or done anything and had been kind of jerked around and people had been lied to, that they suspended the rules and had the meeting at 8 o'clock the next morning on a Saturday. Did not give time for anybody to testify. I think I heard it was like a 3 to 4 minute hearing, and that was it.
Well, that's moving the goalposts is sort of a time-honored tradition in all legislatures, I think. So the wisest thing to do here is just to be as prepared as you can be. The Texas Hemp Federation, we've got, I'm not really sure how many retail stores, either direct members or associate members, or who are supplied by distributors that are members of ours. And we've got the ability to send out email calls to action to all of them. Personally, though, I got a number, I want to say like 25 or 30 shop owners that I have good relationships with, who I have already given, fairly, not advanced, but fairly solid training on how to present what it is you need to say. I'm not telling them what to say. I'm telling them how to do it in a way that's effective. Here's what's not effective. The torches and pitchforks approach, where people get pissed and they want to bombard legislative offices with email
like
after
the Frankenstein monsters on the other side of the door. That's not a good idea.
Yes. And I mean, when you're trying to persuade a legislator that you're right and to do the thing that is right for you, you don't want to treat them like they're the enemy. And you sure don't want to put the staffers through that. When I worked in the legislature, fax machines were a thing, and clever lobbyists figured out how to do, essentially like astroturfing faxes. They would keep those fax machines going all day, to the point that they were useless for their intended purpose. And, the staff people just had to throw that crap away because they didn't have time to deal with it. When this bill comes to the floor, staffers will have been through an exhausting couple of months already. They're not going to have time to comb through voluminous amounts of paper or tens of thousands of emails. They won't be happy campers and won't be predisposed to want to hear what we have to say. So my advice to anybody trying to do advocacy in this space is whittle down what you have to say to the essentials, be respectful and be polite, but be to the point. Don't try to
emails is to have just that your subject line says, I support this bill.
Right.
I don't support this bill. That way, when they do look through the flood, they either see a flood of I support or I don't support. And they get the general idea from there already, and they don't really have to go and look in each individual email for that.
Usually what I try to do when I have orchestrated email campaigns before, it's not really the thing I do anymore, but in the first paragraph and in the subject line, District 51 or whatever district constituent communication, so that the staffer knows that this is a constituent of theirs, and that's why that email is relevant to that office. That tends to get their attention and tends to be more effective. And the first paragraph: Hi, my name is John Q. Public. I live in District 51. I'm a plumber, and I'm writing to you today about this plumbing regulation bill. This is a bad bill because X, Y, and Z. I'd like to discuss it with you. Here's my phone number. Please vote no. Those are really simple facts, and a good constituent relationship manager in this on the staff, usually that's a district director, will pay attention to how many calls and how many emails they're getting for and against different bills. If the member's not particularly engaged already or hasn't staked out a position, they're going to listen to that. But they're just not going to want to. They're not going to be happy if you overwhelm them.
That's why I try telling people, like, when you call, you email, like, calls, obviously make it a polite call, but calls get a lot more attention to them and weight put on them than emails. And emails obviously have their own little set of weight, and then versus like writing letters. And that the best weight you could ever have is personally going, showing up, dressing appropriately, acting appropriately, and even voicing your concern to a staffer, because then when that gets more weight than anything else, that you took the time out of your day to show up and make this be known.
That's right.
And they presume, they're like, oh, obviously, if you're here doing this, there's probably a lot of other people in your neighborhood, in your area, that think the same way you do.
Yes. Also, sometimes it kind of helps to bring letters from all of those neighbors if you've got a little bit of time and you can organize them to, hey, write this down, give it to me. I'm going to the Capitol. I'm going to meet with the chief of staff or whoever. I'll hand it over. That'll carry some weight. One word about who you meet with. A lot of times these staffers are really young people, just out of college. I promise you, they're all really smart, that their bosses have them doing exactly what their boss needs them to do. And so if you come to Austin and you're meeting with a 25-year-old guy who just looks like baby-faced and so young, you assume that he may not know, or he or she may not know what they're doing. You're probably wrong. They probably know everything there is to know about the issue that you're meeting on, or at least enough that they can tell their boss what happened in that meeting. And that's their role there. They're there to represent their boss. The representative can't be everywhere. The chief of staff can't be everywhere. So trust the process enough to know that the person the taxpayer dollars pays for as a state employee, the person in that chair across the desk from you is somebody who's there to serve the interests of the state and the people of Texas. And you shouldn't feel bad about meeting with somebody like that.
So as we wrap this up for this episode of the Lonestar Collective podcast, are there any final thoughts you want to add in, Jay?
Absolutely.
Plug in.
Just folks, if you use as a consumer, if you sell, manufacture, process, or whatever role you play in the hemp-derived cannabinoid world, please pay attention. You don't have to join the Texas Hemp Federation to benefit from the work that we're doing. Feel free to contact me directly, Maguire, Maguire, at texashempfederation.com, or call me or text me, 512-954-8054. Glad to take your call and glad to answer your questions.
Well, we appreciate that. I was going to put a banner up, but you went through so fast, and I'm like,
sorry, man.
I'll put it in post. It's okay. So if you're listening, you can go watch the video, and better yet, if you're listening, I'll put it in the description for the podcast itself. You can get a hold of Maguire at Texas Hemp Federation. And that is Texas spelled out. That is not just TX.
All spelled out. I didn't register the URL, but it's hard to forget.
It's funny because yours, you have to spell it out. And I go to Texas State, and Texas State puts txstate.edu. And we had to remind everybody in our little commercials at KTSW, we're TX State. Fun times.
Probably the source of many bounce-back emails that people don't notice. Anyway, that's all I got for you, Jesse. Just, keep on keeping on. Good to see you're in the Capitol. If you see any of the Maguire Woods people, say hi. I'd like to introduce you to them. It's important to note that the Sky Marketing lobbying team that I have worked with in the past are still in the Capitol every day. And there are other groups working to try to ensure that we come out of this session unscathed. Support the org of your choice because they're doing important work that benefits you.
Well, we appreciate you giving us the time this evening, Jay. That is going to do it. This episode of the Lonestar Collective podcast. I am your host, Jesse Williams. I was joined by guest Jay Maguire of the Texas Hemp Federation. You can reach him at Maguire at Texas, Texas, hempfederation.com. Email him if you got questions. You need to know things. Jay's very knowledgeable about all of this. I definitely recommend you reach out to him. That's going to be it for this episode. We hope everybody has a great week. Be safe out there. Pay attention, get ready for action alerts so you can testify on bills virtually if need be, so we can make sure we're no longer having to have these conversations like this at our Capitol. Peace, everybody.